I'm Brenda, 32 female, and I've made some poor decisions in my life. But this is the story of how it all worked out in the end. Let's start with Aiden, the ex-love of my life, a man who practically had an affair with his work. I guess when you look at it, who can blame him? He took after his late father, who was also consumed by his job, leaving little room for rest or recreation. Me, on the other hand, I thrive on family time, cherishing moments of laughter and simply relaxing together. Aiden and I have been married for an impressive decade, although it felt like just half that time. Why? Because Aiden's work schedule dominated everything. Meetings, spreadsheets, and projects galore. Family time was scarce, and it often felt like we were living separate lives, disconnected from each other and our kids. It was a never-ending cycle of work, with little left for the family he held dear. I did my best, trust me. I tried explaining to Aiden how important it was for us to have more quality family moments. I pointed out how he was missing out on our children's growth and on building memories together. Yet, it seemed like I was talking to a brick wall. Frustration would flare up and he'd insist that I should be grateful for the life he was providing. But I wasn't seeking more material wealth. I just wanted more of his time. Our conversations would normally go like this. Aiden, we need to talk about this. It's been months since we've had a proper family day together.
Brenda, you know how demanding my job is. I'm working around the clock to provide for all of us.
I get that, Aiden, but the kids miss you. I miss you. We're falling apart here, and I can't keep holding everything together on my own.
You think I'm not doing enough? Do you have any idea how much pressure I am under? I can't just drop everything whenever you want me to.
Aiden, I'm not saying drop everything. Just do your best to strike a balance. Our family is falling apart, and you're so consumed by work that you can't even see it. I mean, do you work to live or live to work?
I'm doing what I have to do to provide for us. Maybe if you appreciated that more, you'd stop complaining.
I want you to be present in our lives. I want us to have memories together, to be a family.
And I want you to understand that I'm doing all of this for you and the kids. You have no idea how hard it is to juggle everything.
Like I said, I'm not asking you to drop everything. Just take a step back sometimes and prioritize us, your family.
This conversation is pointless. You'll never understand the pressure I'm under. I'm doing my best, Brenda.
And so am I, Aiden. But I can't keep doing it alone. We're supposed to be a team, but it feels like I'm the only one trying to hold us together.
I don't have time for this right now. I need to get back to work.
Fine, go back to work. But just remember, work won't replace the time you're missing with your family. It would always be a moot point with him. We just sound like broken records. Over time, I realized the futility of my efforts. Aiden's work had a grip on him that I couldn't loosen. So our connection weakened, and the family unit began to resemble more of a cohabitation agreement, which was not what I signed up for. I was stuck in a cycle of contemplation, torn between divorcing Aiden and staying together for the sake of our children. The misery seemed never-ending, and I felt utterly lost. Despite the emotional rift between Aiden and me, I found solace in my relationship with Gertrude, my mother-in-law. She was like a beacon of light in our home, always bringing warmth and positivity. I guess it didn't run in the family because why wasn't Aiden like this? Anyways, our children adored their grandma, and I watched them bond, wishing I had a relationship with Aiden that was as natural as the one they shared with Gertrude. Her presence offered a respite from the tension that weighed down on me daily. I looked up to Gertrude, grateful for her wisdom and the unconditional love she showed our family. I often pondered why bad things happen to good people. Life took an unexpected turn one day when Gertrude came to visit me. With a heavy heart, she shared the news that she had been diagnosed with a terminal illness. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was sitting on the couch and Gertrude had just arrived for a visit. As we talked about the kids and general family matters, there was an air of something heavy hanging over her. Finally, she took a deep breath and looked at me with a mix of sadness and determination.
Brenda, there's something I need to tell you. It's not easy, but I think you deserve to know.
I immediately felt a knot forming in my stomach. Her tone was different, and I could sense that whatever she was about to say was going to change things. What is it, Gertrude? You're worrying me.
I've been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, Brenda. It's terminal.
Time seemed to stand still for a moment. My heart sank, and I couldn't believe what I had just heard. Cancer? Terminal? The words echoed in my mind, and I felt like the floor had dropped out from beneath me. Oh my God, Gertrude, I don't even know what to say.
There's not much to say, dear. It's a reality I have to face, and I wanted you to know.
Tears welled up in my eyes, and I reached out to hold Gertrude's hand. She was being so brave, so strong, even as she delivered this devastating news. How are you holding up, Gertrude?
I have my moments, Brenda, but I've come to terms with it. I want to make the most of the time I have left.
This isn't fair, Gertrude. You have always been the heart of our family. You can't leave us.
I don't plan on leaving you completely, Brenda. I'll always be a part of your lives, even if it's not in the same way.
You've always been there for us, for me. I don't know how we're going to do this without you.
You're stronger than you think, Brenda. And you have Aiden and the kids. Lean on each other, and remember, I'll be watching over all of you.
As we held hands, I could not help feel a mix of emotions. Sadness, fear, and a deep sense of gratitude for Gertrude's presence in our lives. The conversation was heavy, but her strength gave me a glimmer of hope that we could navigate the challenges that lay ahead. It was a gut punch, a moment that made me question the unfairness of life. Gertrude, the one who had been a source of strength for all of us, was now facing her own battle. I could hardly fathom the thought of not being around her constantly, let alone completely losing her. As I listened to her explain the gravity of the situation, the tears welled up in my eyes, and I realized that the challenges I'd have been facing were minor compared to the ones that lay ahead for all of us. Later that same day, I found a moment alone with Gertrude. The weight of her diagnosis still hung heavy in the air. Gertrude, did you tell Aiden about your condition?
Yes, I did. I wanted to be open with him about everything.
And how did he react?
Well, to be honest, he didn't seem to pay much mind to it. He brushed it off and said he was busy with work.
Are you kidding me? He's so consumed with work that he can't even be there for you when you need him the most?
Brenda, don't be too hard on him. You know how he is. He has his way of dealing with things.
Dealing with things? Gertrude, you're his mother. You're dealing with something incredibly serious, and he acts like it's just another thing on his to-do list.
Brenda, I know you're upset, but please, try to understand him. He's coping in his own way.
Coping or not, this is unacceptable. I don't care how busy he is. He needs to step up and be here for you, for us.
Brenda, I appreciate your concern, but right now, let's focus on making the most of the time we have together.
You're right, Gertrude. I'm just so frustrated. This isn't how it should be.
Life doesn't always go according to plan, dear. All we can do is support each other as best we can.
As I left Gertrude's side, I couldn't shake off the anger I felt towards Aiden's indifference. I knew I had to have a serious conversation with him when he got home that night. This was a wake-up call, a stark reminder that life was too precious to be overshadowed by work and neglect. When Aiden walked through the door that night, I was ready. The frustration, the hurt, it all boiled over. Aiden, how could you? How could you not even care about your own mother's health?
Brenda, I told you, I've been swamped at work. I can't just drop everything.
You're heartless. She needs you and you're not there. Aiden's anger flared, matching mine. He shouted back, the argument spiraling into a heated exchange. I couldn't take it any longer, the emotions overwhelming me. With a rush of adrenaline, I slapped him across the face. The room fell into silence. Aiden stared at me, his expression unreadable. He didn't say a word, just turned on his heel and started packing his bags. I started crying after realizing what I had done. Aiden, no, I didn't mean to. I'm sorry. My pleas fell on deaf ears as he continued to gather his belongings. I was begging him to stay, begging him to listen, but it was as if he had shut down completely. And then he was gone. The door slammed shut behind him, leaving me alone in the wake of our explosive fight. I spent the entire night calling and texting him, desperation and regret consuming me, but he had blocked my number. After Aiden walked out that door, I held on to a sliver of hope that he'd come back. I thought he'd just take a break and then be back within a week or two, but a week turned into 2, and then a whole month went by without a word from him. Our kids began to ask where he was, their innocent faces filled with concern. I couldn't bring myself to lie to them, so I told them he'd be back soon, even though I had no idea where he was or what he was doing. I continued trying to reach out to him, but every attempt was met with silence. It was like he vanished into thin air. I shared my worries with Gertrude, hoping for some wisdom or insight. She shook her head, a mix of sadness and frustration in her eyes.
He's acting childish, Brenda. Running away from his responsibilities like this won't solve anything.
I couldn't help but break down in front of her, tears streaming down my face. She comforted me, assuring me that he would come back eventually, but as the weeks turned into months, and the months into years, that hope began to fade. 3 whole years went by with no sign of Aiden. No calls, no messages, nothing. It was as if he disappeared from our lives completely. I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was terribly wrong, and the kids began to assume the worst, thinking that he was no longer alive. As much as I wanted to move forward, the uncertainty and pain continued to linger, a constant reminder of the man who had walked away from his family without a trace. As the years went by, Gertrude's health continued to deteriorate. I couldn't shake the feeling that Aiden's absence was only making things worse for her. It was as if his disappearance had left a void that was impacting all of us, including his own mother. Trying to keep everything together on my own was proving to be a daunting task. The house we once lived in felt too big for just me and the kids, especially with a single stream of income coming in. We had to downsize to a more manageable home, making tough financial decisions to make ends meet. Resentment grew within me. Even though I had slapped Aiden during that heated argument, I couldn't shake the feeling that he had taken things too far, leaving us without so much as a goodbye. It was hard to comprehend how someone could abandon their own children like that, regardless of whatever issues we were going through. My life felt like it was falling apart piece by piece. It was like I was juggling so many responsibilities, trying to be both mother and father to my kids while dealing with the emotional turmoil of Aiden's departure. Some days were just a blur of trying to make ends meet, while others were filled with loneliness and longing for the life we once had. One day Gertrude called me and her voice sounded different, a mix of seriousness and urgency. She told me to come over to her place, and I could tell from her tone that whatever she wanted to talk about was important. When I got to Gertrude's place, I could see she wasn't doing well. She looked weaker, and it was tough to see her like that.
I was gonna tell you to bring the kids, but I didn't want them to see me like this.
It hit me hard, realizing time was running out and there wasn't much left we could do. Gertrude started talking and it was hard to hold back tears. She said not to worry and that things would be okay eventually, but the reality of the situation was heavy. She told me she was disappointed in Aiden, her son, for just disappearing without a word. She was hurt that he left not just us, but even his own mom in the dark. She sounded sad and angry at the same time. Amidst the emotions, Gertrude said,
"Call my lawyer. I need you to sign some important documents for me."
The mention caught me off guard, leaving me wondering what was so important that she needed to talk to him about. It left me curious and a bit nervous about what was coming next. While on the phone with her lawyer, Gertrude dropped a bombshell. She wanted me to be the sole beneficiary of her assets and estates. It was a shocker, and I didn't know what to say. I started denying the money, feeling overwhelmed by the idea of it all. But Gertrude was adamant. She told me that she'd be offended if I didn't accept it, and that I truly deserved it, especially after everything Aiden had put me through. Hearing those words from her meant the world to me, and I couldn't help but break down again. I wished I could freeze time, just to keep Gertrude with me forever, but I knew that was impossible. She reassured me and told me that I needed to meet up with her lawyer to sign the documents while she was still alive, to make the whole thing more credible. So, I did what she asked, meeting with the lawyer and signing the papers. It all happened quickly, and within a week, everything was sorted. But shortly after that, Gertrude passed away in the hospital. Her warmth, her positivity, and her wisdom were gone, leaving a void that was hard to fill. It was tough to come to terms with the fact that she was no longer with us. As we organized the funeral, it was a somber yet beautiful service, but the weight of the loss was undeniable. The atmosphere was heavy with grief, and it felt like the world had dimmed a little. The funeral was held at my new house, and I was rushing around to ensure everything was in place. Just as I opened the door, a knock startled me, and there he was, Aiden, in a black suit, on the phone discussing business. I was taken aback, almost ready to scream. Aiden ended his call, saying he'd call back, and turned his attention to me. We went outside, away from the sombering gathering and away from the kids, who had already faced so much heartache. He explained that he was there to collect his inheritance. His words hit me like a cold gust of wind, sending shivers down my spine. 3 years, Aiden. You were gone for 3 years and you're showing up now, when she's already gone?
Listen, Brenda, I don't have time.
No, of course you don't have time. You never have the time, don't you?
Look, I didn't come here to argue with you. I just want to collect what's mine.
Well, it's funny you say that because there's nothing here for you. Aiden started to laugh, calling me petty for taking offense to his absence, as if I wouldn't take offense to that. He's an idiot. I let him laugh it out, then I revealed that I was actually the one who was going to inherit everything. His laughing died down when he realized I was being serious. I told him to wait for a moment while I collected the proof. I walked back inside the house, my heart racing, to grab the documents that could prove my right to Gertrude's inheritance. Returning to the doorway, I held out the papers for Aiden to see. They were the proof that I was meant to receive what she had left behind. Aiden's reaction was explosive, his face turning red and his eyes blazed with anger. He threatened to involve lawyers, his voice sharp and tense. I remained steady, explaining that his sudden disappearance for 3 years wouldn't reflect well in any legal battle, and it's not like there was any foul play. Gertrude herself wanted me to have the inheritance, but his ego just couldn't handle that. But he wasn't having it. He unleashed a torrent of curses, his anger almost palpable in the air. I stood my ground, determined not to let his outbursts affect me. I reassured him that his threats wouldn't work, and I calmly urged him to leave. His presence was unwelcome, and I wasn't going to let his anger disrupt the somber atmosphere that had settled over the house.
Just tell me this. Did she say anything about me?
He actually looked sad. I was battling between lying to him and telling him the truth. I chose the latter. During her last days, all she said about you was that you broke her heart. She was angry with you, disappointed, and dare I say, disgusted. That's why she gave me the inheritance. In her eyes, you were already dead to her. That did it. That was the nail in the coffin. No pun intended. Aiden looked like he was about to break down. A sight I hadn't seen since our wedding day over a decade ago. He had replaced his soft heart with a hard one, and I think it was only in that moment when he realized how much of a fool he'd really been. He mumbled a half-hearted apology, and he told me to tell the kids that he would come see them when he was ready. And before I could respond, he left. I saw him walk off in the distance, and I couldn't help but feel heartbroken all over again. I was glad that I didn't give him a dime, though, because he truly didn't deserve it. He still hasn't come around like he said he would, but then again, I'm not surprised.